Welcome. Hello. Welcome to our Diamond Mentor Moment. This is Janine, your keynote speaker for intercultural creativity, neurosomatic creativity, and prismatic leadership. Excited to be with you on this beautiful hot July. I don't know where you are, but I'm in Phoenix, so it is a little bit warm over here. And today we're talking about something that we, especially educators or people who facilitate or lead people, mentor, coach, we've known intuitively. If you're a parent or a caregiver or a guardian, you know intuitively this term that we're going to talk about today. In the poster flyer that I post about my lives, it's called Transcendent Thinking. Right? How does transcendent thinking increase creativity, right? Increase well being, increase our overall sense of life? First of all, what is it? And so, you know me, I love my research, love my science background. We have the brain, right? A lot of neuroscience to back up what we're saying because we feel that a lot of people are taking people who are speaking about creativity and play and taking breaks and wellness a lot more serious when we add in, okay, well, what's going on in the brain, right? How do we show that? And so today we're going to talk about transcendent thinking, and I'm going to bring in some other voices to support what we've always known, us educators, the importance of making learning a part of the whole experience, the whole building, and the whole person, and building the whole person and going beyond the scantron, right? I did a post about a month or two ago, like, life gives you no scantrons. I don't know about you, but when life had a test, there was no A, B, C, or D. There was adaptability, flexible thinking, emotional, regulation. All of those things are a part of the test of life, but there was no scantron. And so, what does it look like to get our students ready for the real world, but also to retool adults for the real world as well? And so, we are going to talk about transcendent thinking. What does that look like within the classroom, but within life's classroom as well? This is Dr. Helen over at USC, and she is the director of CANDLE, which is the Center for Effective Neuroscience, Learning Development in Education. And so I want her to introduce this concept, and then we're just going to go back and forth and really talk about how does transcendent thinking look like in your life, and if you have students or any youth, what does it mean for them as well? Because her research is mostly focused on adolescents and those entering into adulthood. So here is Dr. Mary Helen.
One of the fundamental misconceptions undergirding our education system is the idea that the purpose of school is to support learning outcomes. And learning outcomes are operationalized mainly around two things, both to do with memory. One is memory for semantic information, for facts, and the other is memory for procedures. But in the human brain, there's a third kind of memory that is absolutely fundamental to our growth and development and well-being, and that is autobiographical memory. Autobiographical memory is the story we tell ourselves, the stories of who we are and what we stand for and how we want the world to be. This sort of transcendent thinking that young people do forms the kind of hat stand that all of the other learning gets layered on top of. In essence, organizing the way in which we call up our memories, the way in which we enact our skills, the way in which we notice what needs to happen in different situations. Those are the things that really make us human, and those are the things that we need to reorganize our educational experiences around.
All right, so I'm going to pause her there and we'll be going back and forth. And just as I said, a lot of people are calling for, there's a shift really in the educational system of really what are we educating our students for, and how do we know that they're successful? Just for those of you who don't know my background, I taught third grade for about 3 to 4 years, and then I ran the music program, the arts program, and the gifted program at the same school my entire career as a teacher, about 15 years at a school in Southern California. And I would tell people, the way that I know that my students were successful or I was successful as a teacher, it isn't from looking at the test scores at the end of the year. Show me them when they're 25. Show me how they're able to synthesize information that they're learning in order to live their best life, to pick their best choices, to understand when to pivot and go a new direction in order to mostly regulate and basically the word I said at that beginning, in order to synthesize. And so we have to understand that transcendent thinking, that ability to storytell. Your brain is built for story. And so understanding that no matter what content you're teaching, whether it be math or it's a little bit easier with English language arts or history, because those are usually around stories, but some of the hard sciences, how do you build a story around that? A quick story around this was I have my Alumni 360 nonprofit group where the graduates of my elementary school would come and we would meet once a month, talk about financial literacy, entrepreneurship, literacy, and creative thinking. And one day we were doing stocks, right? And they were learning how stocks work, how investments work. And I had real companies up there, and every now and then, we would expose the next quarter or the next year of how that company did. And I had Blockbuster up there, and those of you who know, Blockbuster didn't do so well at, I think, the year 2005 or sometime back then. And so the kids who had their stock in Blockbuster suddenly lost it, right? And so that was numerically, that's a lesson of, if you own this amount of shares, and what does that look like if the shares are at zero? But the narrative, that's the word I'm looking for. The narrative around that story is these are people's actual lives. There are people who work there, who own stock there, who led the company there, that they lost everything because the company tanked, right? And so what does it look like to teach our students and teach ourselves story around everything that they're learning and have them engage in that transcendent thinking to say, well, what does this mean for me? And I'm not just talking about students, I'm talking about you as well. Do you employ that type of thinking of what does it mean? What does this mean for me? Anything that's going on in your life, any fact, any experience, any person that enters, what does this mean on the larger scale? Thinking on the bigger picture. And then I had a student named Jackie, and I remember she was coming home from college, and I asked her how her finals went, and I just said, so what did you learn, and then how did they test your learning? Was the final exam just exactly what was on the study sheet? And she was like, basically, yeah. It was just, there was no really thinking. There was just that memorization and the regurgitation. I asked you, did you get to create anything new from the information that you learned? And so I think that's where we need to be headed, especially with the research and creative thinking. Where is the creativity in the facts that I've memorized? How do I get to combine and recombine them in order to create something new, in order to solve a new problem and things like that? So what does that look like? And Dr. Mary Helen goes deeper into what does it look like for students who have this ability to think transcendently. Some really have it really deep and some maybe not so much. And so what does that mean? Here's Dr. Helen.
We've known for a long time that infants very quickly grow their brains in the first 3 years of life. We're now coming to appreciate that there's a second major period of brain development that happens just before puberty and lasts all the way into the mid-20s. There's lots of work in neurodevelopment showing that, for example, the kinds of resources and environments that kids have, socioeconomic status, for example, are affecting the ways in which their brains are developing at the group level. Young people across adolescence are needing healthy opportunities to contribute, to be part of communities, to develop a sense of purpose. Those very fundamental psychological capacities turn out to be driving the development of their brains. So as we began to pull apart and understand the neural correlates of what we're now calling transcendent thinking, which is the proclivity to think beyond the here and now and to make broader meaning out of the things that we witness, to also consider the historical or future possible implications, the ethical implications, to become curious about what alternative ways something could have happened, to think about the ways that our perspectives are related to our systems of beliefs and assumptions.
All right. So, really, she gave you the definition of what is transcendent thinking, right? To think beyond the here and now, to be able to shift perspective, to be able to do something we call fictive learning, which is your ability to have alternative endings to stories. And so, what does that look like? To take in account the historical implications, the fact that people have different beliefs, different faiths, different opinions, especially during this time of what does it look like to grow this type of transcendent thinking within ourselves and each others, but also within adolescents and the children, the youth who are entering into adulthood and will be leading this nation. And so what she did was she got about 85 adolescents and she would just show them stories, right? And show them stories and ask them, how does it make you feel? How does this make you feel? And then she had them see the same stories in the fMRI machine, and she tracked their blood flow, right, and what the brain was doing. And then they looked at their brains when they first interacted with them, and then sometime later, 2 years later, and then as they were entering into young adulthood, and they found the effects of transcendent thinking. Who are these people that take the stories that are presented to them, take their own stories, take their own experiences, and take that step to think outside, right? To see, what does this really mean to me? Let's look at the bigger picture. Let's look at connections. And here are her results.
I was really drawn to try to understand, how do young people develop these capacities? What do they look like in the brains of young people? And what might be some of the affordances of these capacities for thinking? What we were able to show, which is quite extraordinary, is that the way in which they were inclined to engage in transcendent thinking about the meaning of the story predicted the physical change in the growth of the white matter fiber tracts of their brain over the subsequent 2 years. That brain growth that we observed predicted identity development in late adolescence, which in turn predicted young adult life satisfaction, that they like the person whom they've become, that they enjoy and feel satisfied with the quality of their close relationships, that their opportunities at school or at work are what they always had hoped for themselves, that those are really what they want to be doing with their life. These findings were not explained by IQ. They were not explained by ethnic group or gender or by socioeconomic status. They were explained by the kind of disposition to think deeply about complex issues in a transcendent way.
All right. Did you hear that last line? Their brain grew over this amount of time from first looking at their brain scans to them entering into young adulthood. And they said that the people, the students who participated in transcendent thinking, once again, that's thinking about the bigger picture, thinking about its implication on your life, thinking about the historical and ethical and moral issues and just how those connections happen. Those who were practicing that earlier on had larger brain growth, and she said that it made a huge impact on their identity development, which is huge, and their life satisfaction. So what does that mean for us? She used the word that I want to talk about, complex. Those of you who know my research, it's intercultural creativity, looking at cultural competency, and that is your ability to think with complexity, right? Things are not just black and white, yes or no, up or down. There's complexity to people, right? You may see outside demographics, but we are walking around with a whole universe inside of our head. So people who train themselves and develop that intercultural creativity, intercultural competency, intercultural awareness and responsiveness, they increase their complexity, where they're aware that there's more connections and a larger story going on beyond just them, their opinions, and just how they perceive. They're aware that other people are having different perceptions. And so what does it look like to have that complexity? Our gems, our 7 gems of intercultural creativity, our third gem is the observational gem. Like, how do you observe your experience and how do you observe the world? And so, let's see, we are going to be moving the thinking from just me, which toddlers come in, babies come in with just me, to us. What's going on with us? How does my behavior affect the us, to affect my social sphere, and to the world at large? And so this is very important for our young people to get a hold of, but also for our adults, right? A lot of us need to be reskilled and retooled in the ability to think with complexity. And so I need us to understand that thinking is an activity that your brain needs energy for. If you are thinking with your brain and thinking about how other people are operating through the world, and we call that theory of mind, right? If you're considering the emotions and the positions of other people, you're considering their theory of mind. That takes brain power, right? And in order to keep your brain strong, you should be thinking. And this transcendent type of thinking will be a way to keep your brain strong. So here's another new neuroscientist that I absolutely love. His name is Dr. Raul John Jandile, and he's over at City of Hope. He's a neurosurgeon in Southern California, and he talks about the brain as a thinking flesh. If you're going to work out your biceps, you go to the gym or get some weights and you work out your biceps. How do you work out your brain?
You have to do the exercise of actually using that thinking to grow your brain, and then that growth in the brain over time predicted identity development, and then that identity development predicted these young adult outcomes.
But the flesh in our skulls, it's meant to think and feel. And that is the power of self-growth. And it's a thinking machine, it's a thinking flesh that you actually have to use or to protect itself, because it's an energy hog, right? It's 3 pounds, but uses 20%. If you're not using parts of it, it'll program itself to let those parts of the garden wither. So the diversity of thinking and the depth of thinking, just one level past what you're used to, is the way to keep the whole garden flourishing. And it is a garden in there. There's chemicals, there are things moving, there are different types of brain cells. It's not just neurons. So I always try to give that metaphor analogy, if you will, that it's a garden and you have to irrigate it and stimulate and tend to all the corners, particularly the ones you're starting to neglect. Maybe it's your left hand. Getting out of the box and engaging the recesses of your mind is the most important thing. And then you have the creative things happen.
All right, so that is Dr. Jandile talking about exercising your brain by using it by thinking. And Dr. Mary Helen talked about the importance of transcendent thinking. And so I'm going to suggest with the neurosomatic creativity framework that we are pushing out in the future, that the arts are one of the best ways to support this type of thinking, this type of going beyond yourself, understanding the experiences of others, understanding connections and just the bigger picture, and using metaphors and analogies and symbols and things like that to communicate an idea. Right? What does that look like? And I believe the arts are a wonderful vehicle to do that. And so we are going to wrap up our time. I try to keep these under 20 minutes. Transcendent thinking is the type of thinking you wish to employ when you go around in your life. Do you really look for meaning in even the small things, right? Nature is a big way of communicating with you. I even look at, I moved to a street called Marguerite Street, and that is pearl in French. So what does that mean? My logo is a diamond and pearls, right? I'm always trying to make connections because I know that is working out my brain to think deeply and to just to connect the unconnected. So I am going to end our time asking you to think transcendently. And I'm going to say, when you go out to new places, especially places in nature, do you make those connections to really go beyond the physical, right? Like, you can teach plants, you can teach parts of plants, you can teach water cycle and see it in action. But do you go beyond to see the bigger picture of what is truly there? And I was at Yosemite in 2015, and I recorded this park ranger during their informational movie, and he had such beautiful words to say about his transcendent experience with being at Yosemite. And I wanted to share that with you.
Engage with the complex
After this closeout from Dr. Mary Helen, she's going to talk about why we need to transcendently think.
of the social and moral lives that they and others are living, and that we are co-creating together in our society, is what is deeply, deeply motivating and purpose generating in all people, but especially in young people. So when our educational system thinks of the learning process as enabling a young person to think about the kind of world that they live in, but also the kind of world they want to create, that is good education.
All right, so that is good education, not just the memorization and the procedure type of learning, but how do we take what we're learning and apply it to the bigger picture? And then where my research comes in, how do we take what we're learning and create something new from it? Create something new that enhances the lives of people, that solves new problems, and that is a way of contribution, right? To not just your generation, but for generations to come. And so I will leave you with the words from Yosemite, from the park ranger there, who talked about thinking transcendently with this area of being around Yosemite and being around water, not just learning about plants and water cycle and just the scientific memorization of the space, but how do you look at the bigger picture and feel connected to a bigger purpose than yourself.
I think the power of Yosemite is the power of water. It's a gathering place of water. All the waters of the sky flow into that one spot. And Yosemite Falls seems to flow out of the clouds itself, as if out of nowhere, which makes it a gathering of life, which makes it a gathering of people and animals and plants, and a gathering of spirit as well. So yes, it's transcendent, just as walking into a cathedral is transcendent. And I think that when people go into these spaces, they find that they have enough spirit that they can fill the space, and they can be filled by those spaces.
And they can be filled by those spaces. So wherever you go, it doesn't have to be a cathedral, wherever you go into nature, into learning, into your home, into whatever space, whatever you're learning, whoever you're learning from, you know those speakers that can just move you, like they just touch your spirit, they touch your soul. Those are transcendent learning experiences. And so how do we make these experiences more frequent for our students in class and for our adult learners as well? And that's why in my own trainings, I bring in the arts, I bring in music, I bring in discussion, I bring in just different ways for us to experience the content, as opposed to straight lecture or just straight reading from a book. How do we bring the learning alive and make it applicable to the people who are going through the process? Don't forget, your brain is emotional first. You learn through emotion first, and then logic comes into play. So thank you so much for sticking with me. Thank you for wanting to know this new term. For some of you, last time I talked about entelechy. This time I'm talking about transcendent learning. Always new words with me because I love vocabulary. Please know that our online course is coming out in September. We're going back to school, just like the kids are going back to school. We're going back to school too. And we get to go through each of the 7 gems: the mindset, the empathy, observation, curiosity, perspective shifting, authentic adaptation, and being a bridge across cultures and across groups. Thank you so much for being with me for this Diamond Mentor moment. Please feel free to share your comments, share which place helps you just come alive and think on a transcendent level. I would love to hear from you, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.